Hello, in this series we're looking at making low poly landscapes and low poly work. This course is part of a much bigger course where you can go from beginner right through to advanced. Check that out on gabbit.co.uk. Also, if you need to discuss and chat and work through problems, then you can try out the Discord server. You can chat to people like myself, and there's lots of other helpful people on there as well. And lastly, if you want to support me, I've got a Patreon account and all these links are in the description. So we're going to create this low poly cube island. This is so we can develop our skills that we've already learnt in previous courses. We're still at a beginner level, and throughout this series we'll be learning new tools and ways of modelling. I'll also put a list in the description of the different things I refer to so you can jump to those sections. So let's start with what is low poly. Low poly is taking complex models and reducing them to basic shapes. It gives a really interesting, intriguing style, and it's usually sharp edges and flat shading. Now, low poly can actually refer to any object that has a low polygon count, but it's also a specific art style, which has these sharp edges and flat faces. It's a great one for beginners and artists as you're trying to take complex shapes and reduce them down, so you're simplifying all the shapes, and that can really help you understand 3D and working in 3 dimensions. It's a great one for beginners because you can be creative, you get quick results, but it's also great for advanced levels because you can be really artistic and creative. It's also great for getting used to all the tools and learning the interface by doing something that's fun and exciting. There's lots of different styles you can go for. You can go very simplistic and quite minimal. Let's take this one for example. They're very basic primitive shapes, but it still creates a nice look. Whereas this one, they've gone to much more detail, modelling each roof tile, obviously repeating a few, and building up the scene. But it's still all very basic shapes, and that's why it's really great for beginners. You can go to town with your style, and you can see a certain texturing that this person has used, and lots of sort of cut out shapes. This is quite a complex version of low poly, and I wouldn't suggest this for beginners. But you can see the sorts of things you can do with different styles of low poly. Now there's 2 things that are worth noting when you're doing a low poly landscape. One is your shot construction. These people have thought very carefully about the composition and the way it looks. This one's almost isometric, similar to this one, but this one has really thought about the construction and the viewing angle. So that's something worth thinking about. Don't worry too much about it, but if you're an artist you might already know those sort of things and be thinking about that when you're creating your scenes. The other thing that's worth noting is choosing a colour palette. So you can see these 2 scenes have got very specific colour palettes, so they're only using a few colours that complement each other in some way. So if you look up colour palettes and colour wheels, they'll help you. It's not vital again, but it creates a really nice scene. So here's the scene we're going to create, and I'm going to break it down into different sections. I'm going to allow you a bit of creativity as well, so I won't be going through everything, but there's a few points that might catch you out, so I'm going to explain each of those. And then your challenge will be to create your own low poly landscape, or islands in this case, and you can extend this and add your own details. I would say there's 2 stages to creating low poly work. The first is to get your basic shapes and your basic scene, so block out as it were, and then the next stage is to add the minor details. So let's say with these small houses that are in this scene, just put them in as cubes to start with, and then you can make them into a house in the second stage. But it can be frustrating if you've added a few details to an object and then you realise it's the wrong shape, size, and you have to adjust those details. So get your basic scene set up first, then do the details. So I've started a new file and we're going to start with the islands. And for the islands, they're very similar to this, but I have created a beveled edge down the side. So I'm going to show you how to do a bevel. If you go into edit mode with tab, and then I select edge mode with control tab, I select the outside edges by right clicking and shift right clicking all the outside edges like this on one level. And the bevel command is control B. And you can see that when I move my mouse now, without clicking anything, I can bevel the edges, and then if I scroll with my scroll wheel, I can make them curved. And about there looks good. And there we go. Now of course if you were watching previous episodes about the chess piece, you'll know that if I press smooth now, it will smooth the whole object. But what I want to actually do is create those sharp edges and smooth edges in the right places. So I've clicked on auto smooth, and I can either bring down the angle here, so something like 30 is always good, and that's usually the default, and that does the job, or I can go in and mark sharp the specific edges that I want to be sharp. And once I've got this stage, I can then just duplicate this object with Shift D, grab in the Z axis, G then Z, or grab the manipulator, scale in the Z-axis, and just scale it out slightly. And now I've got a sort of cap, which I had on my islands. And then lastly, I created some grass the same way, just Shift D to duplicate. I always right click after I duplicated, so I know there's a duplicate there, right on top of the other one, and then move it up in the Z-axis, scale it in the Z, it's there, and just scale it in. And there we go. Sometimes I colour things in straight away, sometimes I leave it to the end. I always leave it to find the true colours right at the very end, and sometimes just add colours so I can see the differences. So that's using the bevels, and now you can get lots of these islands just by duplicating them. Now I'm going to show you the way I made these pipes. I'll start with a new file again so it doesn't confuse anything and things get in the way. You can just obviously left click and add objects in different places wherever your cursor is. I'm going to delete the default cube and click in the center for now. And for the pipes, I think the best way is to start with a torus. So Shift A to add, mesh, torus. And before I edit anything, I need to edit its properties down here. And it's the major segments and minor segments, as well as the major radius and minor radius. So let's go to top view with 7 on a numpad and 5 to go into orthographic mode. And this is a very big curve on a pipe. I'm only going to take this section and then I'll extrude those two edges out, and then it's a nice curved pipe. But I want to make it a bit fatter and shorter, and I want less segments. So if I bring this right down, so it's still got a bit of a curve, but it's got that low poly feel. A number divisible by 4 is good, then you know that it's going to be cut off here, and obviously 27 isn't, but 28 is. And 12 segments looks okay. You could maybe go up or down, but it's a good one because again it's divisible by 4, so we can cut it into quarters. And the major radius will come in a bit, and the minor radius will make it a bit fatter. So there we've got this nice sort of fat pipe going around the corner. Now we can go into edit mode, and we want to delete all this section here, so we've got a corner to our pipe. Let's go into wireframe mode for that. You can also go into sort of see-through mode there, but wireframe's a bit clearer. So press Z on your keyboard, and then face mode, Control Tab for face mode, or you can select it down here. Now A to deselect everything, B to box select, and let's select half, and press delete, and delete faces, and then B to box select again, and delete that half by pressing delete and faces. Now let's go back to edge mode, press Control Tab, select our edge loop here, and hopefully you can remember how to select an edge loop. Try and remember that now. It's Alt right click. So Alt right click will select an edge loop. So I'm selecting this one, pressing E to extrude and pull it out, and I want to constrain it to the X axis by pressing X. Let's bring it to just about there because I'm going to create modules for my pipes. So E to extrude, right click and scale up, and this will create a connection. E to extrude, pull it out in the X, constrain it to the X by pressing X and bring it out to about there. Let's go back into solid mode now and see what we've got. Now of course this isn't filled in, so we need to press E to extrude, scale it down. So I right click to set the extrusion. Now I'm pressing S to scale, and about there, so I press the left mouse button, E to extrude, pull it in and constrain it to the X axis, and left click. We shouldn't need to worry too much about the inside, but we can fill it if we like. So with those edges selected, press F to fill, in case you want to use this on its own. And we're going to do the same to the other side. Now you could make this completely identical by having a mirror down here, but that'll take a bit of fiddling about. It's probably just easier to do it by eye, and the results will be fine. So Alt right click, extrude, right click again to set the extrusion, and then scale that up. About there. E to extrude and pull out. We'll constrain it in the Y axis. And we're about there. And then E to extrude, right click to set that extrusion. Now scale it in. E to extrude, right click, grab in the Y axis. And then press F to fill. So there we have one bit of a pipe. And I can rotate this and use this as a corner in lots of different ways. What I can also do for the other module, I simply add Shift A, cylinder, but make sure that your cylinder has the same amount of vertices, and I can't remember how many it was now, 12 I think. So let's rotate that around the Y axis 90 degrees, scale it in, Shift X so it doesn't scale on the X axis because that's the right size, let's pretend. And now I made a mistake there. I added it in edit mode. Now this is a really useful one because you'll often want to do this, be able to separate an object that you've accidentally added in edit mode. Now to select different objects, you hover over them and press L. So let's deselect everything and press L, deselect everything with A and press L, and that's how you select different objects that are part of the same object. It's a bit strange, but they are separate objects. As you can see there, they are separate, but they're part of the same object in object mode because I added it in edit mode. Silly me. So to get rid of this, or to make it its own object, you press P for separate. That's how I remember it anyway. So separate by selection, because that's the selection. So P by selection. And now when I go back into object mode, I can select them separately. What you will notice is that the object origin will be in the same place. And you can just click on this and set origin to geometry. Let's move that into position. And there we go. I've started work on my plumbing. Now if I want to move things really gently, like there, I'm moving very gently, you hold down Shift when you're dragging and moving. And I need to scale that down a touch, don't I? There we go. There's my pipe modules, and I can easily Shift D, drag that over there, rotate around the Z 90 degrees. Oh, that was minus 90, rotate Z 180 now. And then attach that onto the end, and I can create a complex system of pipes. Shift D. Okay, so that's the pipes. Modules are a great way of making big scenes because you make a few parts and you link them all together. It's often the case with low poly work that you're copying and pasting a lot. So I think that's enough for this episode. Now you can make some islands and some pipes. In the next episode we'll be making water and some of the buildings. So your task is to make those islands and pipes ready for the buildings. Thanks for watching.